Nearly 4 years ago, the Space Engineers developers announced that they were working on volumetric water, showing off some very crude examples you can see here, stating that their goal was to be able to have volumetric water on a planetary scale. Over the next 3 years, they slowly dripped out teasers of this volumetric water, showing it advancing from 2D experiments to 3D examples in Engine, to the eventual announcement of their new game using volumetric water, Space Engineers 2. Space Engineers 2 was released into early access a few months later, and the developers have slowly been working through a long roadmap to add all of its features to the game. The volumetric water is officially coming to the game later this year. However, we don't actually have to wait that long, as when the new Planets and Survival update released, players quickly found that the new water was hidden in the update as well. Before we look at that though, as not everyone in the world is as galaxy brain as you are, dear person who's about to complain about me explaining this, what is volumetric water and what makes it so great? To put it in simple terms, volumetric water is when water is truly 3D. Most games like your Skyrims and Fallouts have a flat 2D plane which indicates where water starts and stops. Beyond this line here, there is water. You will swim, you'll drown, in some games you'll immediately die, but there is a clear delineation where water is by the 2D planes that surround it. The water is a static object that exists in your world. Sure, you can move that object, but it only exists within those certain bounds. Volumetric water is much more like a real liquid. It has depth, it has volume. The water fills up spaces it's put into, like lakes or oceans or a box like this one. The water flows around and it can be picked up, it can be moved, and it can be blocked off. To put it simply, volumetric water is a real thing you can interact with, as opposed to the static solutions in 99% of games. Now, this isn't necessarily a new technology, it has been around for at least 15 years and there are other games that use it, but none that I'm aware of that do this on a planetary scale like Space Engineers 2 plans to. Over a decade ago, when Space Engineers 1 was first released into early access, the number one thing that people asked for were planets. Whilst the developers were first resistant to the idea, it was Space Engineers after all, they eventually changed their minds and added planets to the game. Then came the next problem.
Oh wait, sorry, I see the lake. You said you wanted to find some water. I'm gonna go have a look at the water, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
You go do that.
And... splash. Oh, no, apparently. Bounce off the surface of the water. It's ice! None of it's water! None of it's liquid water, it's all ice!
I'm sure many of you that are aware of Space Engineers have seen this Soviet Womble video, as it's probably the most viewed Space Engineers video of all time, and despite what people on Reddit will tell you, because of this exact thing, water became the next big question for Space Engineers. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. Space Engineers is a game where you can build whatever you want and destroy whatever you want. You can build massive ships, you can tear apart asteroids, dig hundreds of kilometers underground, and if you're as daring as I, you can take the destruction in the game to the next level and just destroy an entire planet. You know, just because you could. Because Space Engineers allows you this level of destruction of the terrain, if we applied the plain water method that we mentioned earlier to the game, if you dug down far enough, you would find that plane of water under the ground, and if you destroyed the entire planet, you'd be left with a floating sphere of water where it used to be. Space Engineers' physics has never been perfect, it's always been a bit arcadey, and there's also clang as well, which, you know. So it makes sense that the developers likely decided that this wasn't the right approach to adding water to the game. Additionally, Space Engineers only had 4 to 5 developers at most at the time, so tackling a project like water likely wasn't on the cards at the time. However, now, Space Engineers 2 has around 70 to 80 people working on the game, so with much more manpower and a brand new engine to boot, we finally get to today. So, as I mentioned earlier, the most recent update for Space Engineers 2 has volumetric water hidden inside of it, and that volumetric water can only be accessed using the debug menu. However, it's extremely important to mention that whatever I'm about to show you is not the finished version of volumetric water that will be released later this year, and additionally, the version of water we have in the game now is far behind what the developers have shown off in recent teasers. They've been showing off submarines jumping in and out of a giant ocean, hull breaches with water leaking through the side of the ship, underwater biomes and caves, and all of this on a planetary scale with their new water planet called Byblos. As I said, volumetric water will officially be added to the game later this year, and it's already looking very good from the teasers that we've seen and what we can currently access in the game. But just keep in mind what I'm about to show you is 100% not complete, so it won't look perfect, there's a lot of mostly visual bugs, and the performance isn't 100% there yet. But even so, it's still very impressive. So, rather than prattling on any further, why don't I just show you? So, here we are in a Space Engineers 2 world, and down there you can see what in the future will be a riverbed or an ocean bed, but currently it's empty. However, we might just change that. If you press Ctrl and F12, you bring up this menu here to say that you're opening up the debug menu, but your game might become unstable. Well, we don't worry about that here. Press yes, and you can see it opens up here. Now yours will look a little bit different the first time you open this up, but what we want to do is come over to here. You'll probably be on AI by default. You want to go from AI to water at the bottom, and you've got a bunch of options here, and the two you want to turn on are controls and tools, as there's two different ways to spawn in water at the moment. So I've already got them on, but if I untick them, if I untick tools, it disappears. And if I tick tools again, it reappears. And there's a bunch of other ones here. These are all for different kinds of things. Like this one here controls the sun. So if I want to change the time of day and stuff, I use this one. But the one we want to look at first is controls. So if we scroll down right to the bottom, or almost the bottom, to here, water edit, you can see here, we've got a button to add water and a button to clear water. So if I press add water now, you can see we have some water. Now, obviously this isn't flowing, but there's an easy way to fix that. We just have to press F12 again and add some more water. And now our water is flowing down the hill. But as you can see, it was a very small amount of water, so we immediately lost track of it as it flowed down the cliff. So if we press F12 again, and we have our slider for amount of water and radius of water, so we'll just drag those up to max, press add water again. And if we move away, we'll see that our water is flowing down the hill in a sort of tsunami. And you can see that this water is flowing down the side of the mountain. Now, as I said, the water here isn't complete, and it seems, probably for a performance reason, if I move far enough away, it will actually stop moving. And you might be able to see that when I get closer to the water, it's kind of juddery in the way it moves. But I can assure you I'm at 60 FPS, so I think that juddery is just on the physics update for the water, and not the game actually lagging itself. But as you can see, the water is flowing down the mountain, through these trees, and doesn't it look great? Wow. I imagine when the water is more complete, it will flow through and it will destroy all these trees. I can't imagine that it's going to leave all the trees here. And speaking of the water being incomplete, you'll notice that this water is still at the top of the mountain, where if it was truly volumetric, it should have actually flowed out from here and down the mountain. I don't know if this is because the water system is incomplete, or we don't understand how this debug menu is working, and maybe this spawns an infinite source of water, but it's just interesting to note. You see if I come under the water, get the water shader, and I come out, I'm back to normal. There's currently no sounds for water as well. The focus of the development appears to be on the visuals and the physics of the water. Speaking of the physics though, I can place down blocks in front of the water and I'm able to block off the flow. And now, whilst it's not working perfectly, there's a patch of water over here. Oh no, it's gone. The water has now disappeared from the side of the mountain. And as we go down, you can see in front of me, the water is flowing down the mountain to the bottom. And as I come further down, you can see that the water is receding back instead of infinitely flowing from the top of the mountain. So like I said, either these tools spawn a infinite source of water, and that's why the water is able to flow down, or alternatively, maybe water won't be finite, or alternatively, again, that is something that will be changed in the future. And if you want to keep up to date with what is changing in the future, don't forget to like and subscribe. If I come to a space world momentarily, you can see I've got this ship here, which has this glass enclosed section at the front. So if I come inside, close my doors, I can open the F12 menu, scroll right down to the bottom, and I can spawn water inside the enclosed area of this ship. I'm not actually sure how much water I actually need, so I'll try a little bit. Oh, that seems way more water than I actually need. No, actually, it's enclosed inside. We've built a sort of fish tank inside the ship. So if I get in the cockpit and I move around, and despite it glitching a little bit outside the front of the ship, it's still fully enclosed inside. And I presume if I remove a block, then the water then flows outside into the vacuum of space. Now, I think the reason it's looking a little bit funky is because I think I've spawned way too much water that can actually physically be inside the front of the ship and it doesn't know how to handle it. Oh no, I don't even want to think about what water infinitely flowing into the void of space will do to this world. Oh, you can see the water level's actually going down. So I guess that means this time, for some reason, the water isn't functioning as an infinite source. Now, you probably have the question, well, shouldn't water freeze in space? Actually, water would actually boil in space. But as with everything to do with water in Space Engineers 2, everything we see here isn't the finished final version, so just presume that everything that this water is doing at the moment will change in the future. But, as I mentioned earlier, there's two different ways to spawn in water, so let's take a look at the other method. So if I come down here, you can see that this is a lake. You can see down here there's a coral texture, so perhaps it's more of an ocean than a lake. But if I put my head over here, right next to this rock, you can see that the rock goes above my head, but below my head there is the ocean bed. And if I open up the debug menu again, and this time go to tools and scroll down, we have procedural water and then lake radius, which I'm going to turn up to max. And then we have the options for mass fill lake and mass fill domain. So if I mass fill lake, you can see that we have created, well, presumably a lake in this area. And it actually looks super cool. Now, obviously, in the actual game, come over to the beach here, like that's a tiny little bit of water down there. All of this area here will be filled with water in the final game. But regardless, this is pretty cool so far. Still not perfect. You can see the water is kind of glitching out as it comes to the edge here. It's kind of like sloped, but the actual underwater effect applies here. So it's just not meeting the edge of the stone at that angle, but it's almost perfect. So Space Engineers is a building game, so if I get a block and I drop it in the water, you can see that the block floats in the water. If I expand this to make this a plane, you can see that we have the beginning of a rudimentary boat, bobbing up and down on the water, and you can see my knees are doing a little jig. So if you get some other block, if you get a cockpit and a thruster, I'm not sure if these are going to unbalance my boat, but let's place some thrusters down. We're probably going to need a battery as well. We should be able to build one of the first Space Engineers boats. Look at that, sailing away. As I mentioned earlier, Space Engineers physics is kind of arcadey. In Space Engineers normally, there's no air resistance, so you don't slow down while you're flying around. But in the water, I am facing resistance, and you can see that my speed in the bottom left, if I speed up, I go to 6 meters per second, and if I remove my speed, I go back down to 0. Obviously, this indicates that there's water resistance, which makes sense as there's also buoyancy. But as I said, it's interesting as we haven't had this kind of physics interaction in Space Engineers before. This opens up a bunch of new engineering opportunities for the new water system, and I'm actually pretty excited about that if I'm honest. Oh, and it appears my boat has decided to sink. I have to fish that out of here. There you go, and my boat is back. Sort of. Well, it was floating properly a minute ago. You can also see that I, as the player, float on top of the water as well. And in the future, developers have shown that there'll be swimming animations, rather than just floating on top of the water. I like how this has suddenly decided it no longer wants to float. That's great. In theory, we can make it float better if we put tanks on the side of it, right? Assuming they're empty. There you go. It's sort of floating a little bit. What is actually making me sink back there? Oh, I removed the battery and now we're capsizing. No, game. It turns out building a boat isn't as easy as it looks. I'll leave boat building to the professionals. Now, in order to build a proper ship in Space Engineers, you would need a gyroscope in order to turn it. I love how during my demonstration, my ship is still sinking. Come on. It's actually sinking because of the side I'm stood on it. Okay, look. That's super weird that it's actually good enough to calculate the player's weight into that. I need to stand like right in the middle. As I was saying before, in order to be able to turn a ship in Space Engineers, you need a gyroscope on it. However, if I place one on this ship, it causes my ship to immediately sink into the abyss below. I don't think this is because of the weight of the gyroscope. As you saw, I only placed a small one on there. I think for some reason, when you place a gyroscope on a ship, it just turns off the water physics for it. No idea why. As a subtle reminder, the water system that is currently in the game isn't finished and is hidden for a reason. Luckily though, I have a copy of my ship ready, although it is immediately sinking. Now, if you press F12, there are options for block grid interaction. That allows you to change the things like the buoyancy of ships. So if you want to mess around with building ships, you can mess around with these settings here to make it easier. And it's also worth noting that there's options for damage here, which you've been told that Space Engineers 2 will have a pressure system in the depths of the oceans, which means the further you go, you'll experience a crushing force on your ship until presumably your ship implodes and crushes in on itself. But we'll have to see how all of that works. Piloting this ship along in the water though, it looks great. So much better than it should do for a system that isn't even available in the game. And now we've somehow created one of the first submarines for Space Engineers 2. I don't really understand why it goes from floating 1 minute to sinking the next. But, you know, you can see that it works. One last thing to show you, if I start removing voxels over here, you can see that the water kind of freaks out. As I've said many times in this video, the water system is not finished and has been hidden for us for a reason. But it's possible that we don't fully understand how the water spawning tools work as well. The fact that the first tool we looked at seems to change between spawning an infinite source of water and a finite one is definitely very odd. So I'm leaning more towards the idea that we Space Engineers players probably shouldn't mess around with forces we don't fully comprehend. And that's backed up by the fact that the developers have released many videos showing off much larger amounts of water moving without any issue, and also water on a planetary scale without issues. So perhaps it's a mixture of the case of the water not being done and also us not fully understanding how the tools work as well. I actually spoke to one of the Space Engineers 2 developers about the water when we first discovered it hidden in the game, and he told me that the bulk of the water optimizations actually missed the last update for Space Engineers 2. So I'm hoping that those optimizations might get sneakily added into a future patch, so we can try water on a planetary scale. But if not, we'll just have to wait until water is officially added to the game later this year. I cover everything Space Engineers related on this channel, and there's far more things coming to this game than just volumetric water, so if you're interested in keeping up with the development of the game, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. And if you want to get early access to future videos, you can become a supporter like the people on the left.